Good afternoon. It's 5 o'clock, as we could just hear the church carillon chime. Invite you to pray with me as we get today's Live at 5 started. God, there are things that we know to pay attention to in so many areas of our lives. There are things that we need reminders about. Things that are important, but so important that we don't want to leave them to chance or memory. There are things that we have to schedule in order to make sure they happen, and there are things that others point out to us to show us what we need. We trust that your hand, that your word, that your spirit will guide us, that we might do the work we need to do, that we might take care of the things that we need to take care of. And for that we thank you and praise you. Amen. When Jesus was in Jerusalem, at one point he was teaching, and he came upon this illustration as he was being challenged and asked to explain the kingdom. That's a way to put it. He said, suppose that there's a man who has a house and occupied with evil spirits, and he drives all the evil spirits out and locks up the house and does nothing. And then the evil spirit that was driven out wanders and returns, bringing other spirits with him. And Jesus said, when this happens, when the house is cleaned and emptied and left empty, it is worse off when the other evil spirits arrive. Cleaning it up and throwing out the bum, that's a beginning. But we can't just let things stay empty to preserve them. You're obviously looking at the pews. There's so many faces that have been in these pews before. It needs to be full. And if we were to try to maintain the condition of this, there's no dirt there and not going to wear out, carpet's going to last. If all we want to do is have something clean and tidy, that might not be such a great idea. If we head over this way, I want to see what I think is not a miracle perhaps, but pretty close to it. Check this floor out. I don't know if you can see it. See how shiny it is? I'll tell you what, Mary and Jeff have worked hard. And if you've been around us before, you know how this room can look. Full of stuff. Now I want to just ask this question. If we leave this room this way, just close the doors, perfect floors, nice and neat, in a few months or a few years, will it look like this? Well, of course it won't. What'll happen? We know what'll happen. It'll get filled like all of the other spaces in our lives. It will get filled with clutter and junk. And as that clutter and junk piles up, we can't find that which was once valuable because it's hidden under clutter. And the room might become unusable and unsafe. And ultimately, something that starts out being empty ends up being condemned. Jesus' point in this parable is not about housekeeping. What he's trying to say is, to the religious elite, you're trying to purify the practice of your faith. You're trying to make certain that every person steps in line, does things the right way. You're trying to enforce the law. And in doing that, in separating those who don't fit the mold from those of you who believe that you are the mold, the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, they're missing the point. By emptying the temple, by emptying their faith, the individuals around them, of those who might be less than perfectly savory, they create empty space. And that empty space can be filled with things that are not good, can be filled with things that are evil. Hence the discussion about evil spirits. I think the important thing for us to remember is that it's one thing for something to be emptied, as so many parts of our lives are right now. We have been given, or has been thrust upon us, all kinds of empty spaces. If we let those empty spaces kind of sit empty, and if our only concern is keeping them neat and tidy, and keeping bad influences out of those spaces, everything locked up and sealed, eventually in our lives, the junk, the temptation, the wasted time, the wasted energy, the apathy towards spiritual things, all of that stuff can begin to build up in us. The space that's in our lives right now, because we can't gather in the ways that we used to, can't worship in the way that we've been accustomed, we need to be careful that we are still filling our spiritual house with that which is good, with that which is noble, that which is praiseworthy, those things that represent the values of God's kingdom. It is not a given that our lives will just simply fill up with good stuff when the restrictions are lifted. We need to be careful and pay attention that we are filling ourselves, filling our hearts with those things that are good, so that we don't run the risk of becoming spiritual hoarders. I don't know if this makes a lot of sense to you, but it does to me. Having too much time waiting for something to happen, or preventing something else from happening, or keeping it from getting dirty and trying to keep it clean. There's no life in that. One of the things that I heard early on in a church, my first church actually, it was full-time. They had done some work on the back of the building, and they had an education wing, and they were showing it to me. It was relatively new. The trustees walked down the hallway, paused halfway down and looked halfway down the wall. There were scuff marks. And the guy said in passing, "Isn't that great to see?" I said, I didn't know exactly what he was talking about. He said, "Look at those scuff marks." And I was silent, let him finish. And he said, "You only get those kinds of things when the building is being used by kids. When I see scuff marks on the wall, I think to myself, there have been kids in here, and that's a good thing." What an amazing story that Jesus offers to us. Let us try. Let us try to stay full of that which is good. God bless us, guide us, and preserve us.